I started, it's when I started learning the history and reading just historical facts of just things that white people have done to Black people and to other people of color. You know, I mean, I always knew, like I said, I always knew, but I think that there's a lot of things that I didn't know, that most of us don't know, just how fucked up it's been, like how horrific.
But did you want to know? Did you, I mean, earlier on? Okay, you wanted to know.
Yeah.
You wanted to find out the truth.
But that's the thing. You have to want to know. And that's the problem, is most white people don't want to know, and they refuse to know. And they're like, it's like they're walking around, like they're like, la 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 la, like, you know, can't hear anything. I mean, seriously, I think that you have to want to just learn these facts and understand them, and then you absorb them. I mean, it's super easy. We've got the internet now. I mean, there's just really no excuse.
Oh, I've learned so much in the past 10 years with even just from Facebook, you know, and the internet that I've ever learned in my life.
I mean, yeah, because you want to. Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, is I think a lot of people, you know, they're stressed out in their lives and they're just trying to pay the bills, and, you know, but let alone that white people, you know, we tend to be very comfortable with this status quo of white supremacy. And, you know, it's comfortable to us because, of course, it privileges us. And we have been sold this lie of, you know, meritocracy because of capitalism.
Right.
And, you know, American exceptionalism. So basically it's like all these white people, especially in the United States of America, like they just want to keep believing that all you have to do is work hard. All you have to do is work hard. And that if you aren't financially successful in your life, that it has to be your fault. And therefore, all these white people feel like the inequity between racial groups that exists, that it has to be your fault if you don't have as much, you know, money and resources. And it's just, I think that people are very accustomed to ignoring all of this, and I mean white people specifically, and denying it. And it's too painful and too uncomfortable for them to actually realize, like, what a lie that they've grown up being fed, and how much they just didn't know at all, because no one told them, and they didn't want to know.
Right. Okay. So to that point, after that video, share some of the things you've experienced from people, white people.
Oh man. Well, that video was up for, I want to say it was up for at least a few months, I think, before you
got traction.
Found it. Yeah, before it got traction and really took off and went viral. And prior to that, like the only people, well, not the only people, but most of the people who were watching and commenting were Nazis. and that's because I have a lot of right-wing haters. A lot of these like fucked up Nazi pieces of shit know me and like are obsessed with me just so they can go and like make fun of me, like troll me, you know, whatever. And
so you've been called every name in the book, you've been told, you've been everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You got thick skin. Okay, go ahead.
Well, yeah. Oh, absolutely. But the mistakes that I used to make is that I used to try to engage with these right-wing abusive pieces of shit, these fucking Nazi fucks. Like I think I was too inclined to like give people the benefit of the doubt, even when I knew that they were, you know, inclined to be racist. Like I kept thinking like, let's engage in a conversation, in a debate, and I can explain what
maybe try to educate them or give them your side, right. Or at least, yeah.
Right. I mean, not my side, just the side. Yeah, just like this is what Black people have dealt with in this country. It's what they're still, here are some facts, here are some articles, this is what's going on, this is what has always been happening in this country, facts, facts, facts. But honestly, like, it was a mistake to think that right-wingers, right-leaning types would engage in good faith, because they do not. And they are so deep in that white privilege, in white supremacy, in racism, in capitalism, in patriarchy. Like, they're so fucking deep in this shit that they can't see through it, and they will not allow themselves to see through it. And so everything, it's like they feel like all of these like facts about how fucked up all this shit has been, it's like a threat to their entire identity, you know? So it makes them uncomfortable and angry. So the way that they deal with that is by, you know, making it about me, derailing the conversation and make it about me, to make fun of me, to try to, you know, especially because I'm a woman. So be all types of sexist, you know, misogynistic, stupid ass things for that reason. But then also, you know, with me being Jewish, which not practicing, not religion wise, because I'm an atheist, but Jewish by ethnicity. So then there'd be, you know, jokes about that, comments about my looks, comments about my nose, comments about my breasts, you know, I mean, just the most immature, vile shit. I mean, these are abusive people. That's the thing. The further right you go, it's just, that's being an abuser. Like, that's what it is. It's a mindset of, you know, abuse and oppression. And that's how they roll. I mean,
well, that's one of the game plans, or one of the things with white supremacy is to deny, deflect, and, you know, just blame.
Absolutely.
And so that's what. And so after seeing that, what have you come to the conclusion about people that just don't want to hear about it, just don't want to discuss it, just don't want to talk about it, ain't trying to hear nothing? What conclusion have you drawn?
I mean, my conclusion is, I mean, block those motherfuckers, fucking block them. Like, you know, I had that video on my page, all these Nazi fucks, just all this racist shit, all this anti-Semitic shit, just abusive shit. You know, it's just responding. There's no point. They want attention and they want a platform, and we need to deplatform Nazis. We need to ban them. We need to block them. They go bye-bye. There is no conversation to be had. There's no debate to be had. They are hopeless. Like, on my page, I did, there were a few people that I did engage with, just so that I could have my responses kept up, you know, so that other people could see and like learn from, like, the people who were open to learning could see what my responses were as I educate these pieces of shit. But like, just a few. But for the most part, there were tons and tons where I was just like, ban, block, goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. But the bigger takeaway here is that until people, you know, like, are ready to deal with their shit and to stop being defensive and to stop like trying to fight, like, nope, you know, denying everything. It's like, they have to be ready to actually acknowledge what's going on, and that there's a fucking problem, and that we've got some horrific fucked up shit going on in our society, and that just because you've chosen to ignore it and deny it, you know, that doesn't mean it's not true. But until people recognize it, we can't make them, you know, care. We can't make them want to understand it and want to acknowledge it. And it's not going to happen. And usually it's just, these people have more shit going on. Like, they don't want to deal with their own, you know, their own shit. Like, these people, it's like they're just moving forward in their lives every day, like everything's fine, everything's fine, everything's fine. You know, a lot of these people are like it's like the
because
toxic positive.
they don't have to face a lot of things, or they don't have to deal with it. And that brings me to the point I wanted to ask you while you were talking about that. Your immediate sphere of influence and people around you, not naming names or anything like that. What do you see before and then now? Do you see a difference in the engagement level of conversation, the wanting to know more, wanting to
Yeah,
educate yourself more?
yeah, I absolutely. It's great. You know, I think, well, it was already happening like during the primaries. I think that, you know, like I will say, you know, as sad as I am now about everything, like with Bernie, with him dropping out, with, you know, dumbass Joe Biden, who I fucking hate. I will say, like, you know, I'm disappointed in Bernie, but at the same time, you know, I always have this admiration and love and respect for him, because we can't deny, like, he really did help to wake a lot of people up. And I do think that, like, the primary process, I mean, I think a lot of my, you know, raising my consciousness about all of these systems of oppression, I feel like a lot of it, like, majorly started with him in 2016, you know, really kind of helped me to understand how fucked up this is and what's going on with our corrupt government and all of that. And then again, now that when he ran again in 2020, I think, like, a lot of us throughout the primaries were really, really engaged. A lot of us leftists who, you know, really, you know, wanted to fight for justice and equity and really care about human rights and all of this. So people have been more and more engaged. And then after the primaries, now that we have, you know, all of these protests going on, Black Lives Matter movement, and everybody really paying more attention, you know, to matters about police violence, racism, you know, all of that. I think that it's really, and then of course, coronavirus. I mean, of course, it can't, you know, it's really interesting that we have that, because I do think there's this direct connection that we have coronavirus. You see how fucked up capitalism is and how much it's really killing people. It makes people so sick, kills people with this for-profit healthcare system, and just that people are suffering and can barely survive. We've got these, you know, billionaires who could easily help keep everybody home and healthy and safe and pay for medical care, and then they choose not to. But I think the fact that we had coronavirus, and then we've got, you know, when it comes to George Floyd, like, that's, people were like already, you know, feeling hopeless. Bernie loses, you got coronavirus, you got, you know, all this shit where people are like, holy shit, you know, this is, what are we going to do? Our country, our government is just corrupt and you know, racist and classist and greedy and cruel and selfish. And, you know, this is just horrible. I think the despair, there's just so much despair. It's pervasive. And so then you've got this now, you know, with George Floyd, and people are like, we've been seeing this, we've been talking about this, we've been, you know, trying to do something about it. And it's like, we're done. This is fuck this, you know. And I think that, I think it's great that people are saying fuck this a little bit louder. I mean, I think that's all you have to, like, I don't really know. I mean, just because some people want to ignore it, you know, ignore all of this shit, like this horrific abuse, you know, oppression, state violence, this unacceptable, these human rights abuses. You know, there are all these people, especially white people in particular, who just want to ignore it. And more people just need to say, nope, I'm not going to let you ignore it. And I think that that's why, like, you know, I get a lot of blowback from people who get, like, you know, in my own family, you know, like, we definitely, like, I don't talk to my parents anymore for many reasons, but I definitely think that one of the reasons is it makes a lot of people uncomfortable when you're saying, like, hey, everything is not totally fine. Like, let's just talk about this. Let's point out what we should improve. as a society so that it's a society that functions for everyone. And a lot of people, they're like, nope, that makes me uncomfortable, or that makes my friends uncomfortable, or my coworkers uncomfortable, my colleagues, people in my community. So no, let's just accept this the way, let's accept the status quo. So don't rock the boat, And it's like, no, what other choice do we have? Like this, it doesn't have to be like this. Don't you think?
Yeah. I think especially young people. That's what I'm more proud of. The
Yep.
younger people. So they see it, and since Bernie too, and I don't want to, because there's some people on here they know I was a staunch Bernie guy,
Mm-hmm.
But looking, so like I look at racism and all this research that I've done, and things that I've read, the personal racism, or you call me the N word, but the bigger racism I'm more concerned about moving forward. The corporations running our country,
Yeah.
the lack of empathy, the lack of social services that are available for people. Education is hard to get to. You can't afford a house anymore. You can't send your kids to college anymore. The job, the wages are this way. So I think it starts up top, and
Yes.
and so that's where I'm more concerned. And I like this conversation because that's what I want to move from, this little minutia. It's not minutia. I mean, you got people that really hate you because of your skin color. So I don't want to minimize that. But also, too, I want to get that out there. And then I would like to do things more at the institutional levels of that's. And you've seen some corporations make changes. And I applaud that. For at this moment, we want to keep them going in that direction, not just to let this be one-time deal until the next incident happened, and then we go back.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to start this with you. But yeah, I definitely feel a difference. But I wanted to go back to. Did you have anything else to say about that, or?
No, I mean, I agree with you completely. I think it has to come from the top, but that's the thing, is that I think that what we now understand is that at the top, they are corrupt as hell.
Yes.
They are so corrupt that the only way to make them change these policies that are so horrible and racist and destroying people's lives in so many ways is by all of us, rising up and demanding it. And it's just like, it's unfortunate that there are still so many people who are not wanting to do that. You know what I mean? But like how you said, the younger generation, Generation Z is amazing. And I do think that finally it is different, where it's like, nope, we're not taking this crap any longer.
Okay. So let's get to some of our, the first our bullet points that we came up with to talk about. In your video, you touched on white race. Now, I read the book, The Invention of the White Race, the history of white people, how it was started back in the 1700s, how everything was just invented. And then if you talk about it, we're living by an invented way of life that people think it's the truth.
Yeah.
Just like with the Confederate flag, that's taken on more meaning 100 years after the actual battle. The statues didn't go up until 107 years later. So how, as a white person and talking to other white people, how would you convince them that this whole thing is made up? White people, it's made up for for maximum profit and social control. So how do you come to that? Tell somebody that this is all made up.
Yeah, I will. There are numerous sources, that to share. It's it's a fact. It's historical fact, and and I mentioned that in the video that I did about it at the end. But if you Google invention of race scholarly articles. Like there are all sorts of articles about it. And like I mentioned, that PBS YouTube video, Origin of Race in the US. And even I think it's like even on the definition page of the word race, or I think for Britannica, for their website, it explains it there, if I recall correctly. I mean, there's, people who, like I said, if you
there's no scientific evidence of a race, I mean, a white race or anything like that, a
right.
black, we're all, there's science, we're all humans.
Right. And I also, that's the other thing that I have is, I have citations of scientific papers that talk about that there's no race gene, there's no such thing. And even like when people, sometimes people will say, when they're talking about like a medical condition, and they'll say that, that like Black people are more susceptible to getting
sickle cell.
Sickle cell. Yeah, thank you. That was what I was going to say. That's an example where it's more common in Black people to have sickle cell disease, but actually it's not black, like the color of your skin, that makes you more likely to have sickle cell. What it is, it's the origin from where your ancestors are from, like the location where your ancestors lived. And with sickle cell, apparently, it's also more common, like there's like a gene or something that it causes it. And it's also the same, there's like somewhere else in the Mediterranean where they also are more likely to get sickle cell. And what it is, they traced it, it has to do with, there are a lot of mosquitoes that live in those areas where people's ancestors came from, people who are more likely to get sickle cell. And it has to do with something like to fight malaria, because it's about mosquitoes or something, malaria. And but the point being that it's not about like being Black, it's about the region in which your ancestors lived. And there are that's the whole thing with evolution, that you evolve, you have adaptations, based on the environment in which you live. So the environment is what that's about. It has nothing to do with race, because race doesn't mean anything scientifically speaking. And so it's just white people, they came up with this idea that that Africans, they wanted to use these Africans to so that they would work for them, and so that they could profit off of their free labor. And it was all about greed. It was all about making money, more money for white people. So they stole, kidnapped these Africans, made them slaves, but then they wanted some sort of an excuse for why they would maintain this system of slavery. Like, why could they say that the kids of African slaves would also be born into slavery themselves? So they came up with this idea that, oh, well, they're not like us, they're this other thing. They are Black, and they just labeled them as this thing called Black, and we are white. And like this, it had never even existed before. There was no concept of like, you're Black, I'm white. And it was just like, obviously they had an idea that they looked different. I mean, duh, anybody could see that, but there was no like label of this category of a thing called race, because it didn't exist. And so they came up with that for the purposes of white supremacy, of capitalism, making money, of greed for white people. It was all about
making their lives better,
making their more money for them. Yeah, so that these white people, the Europeans, could have an easier life at the expense of Black people. So at the expense of Black people's humanity. So they just dehumanized Black people so that they could make money off of their free labor, and so that they could try to justify it, to be like, oh, well, they're not really this human like us, like they're this other thing, they're subhuman, they're inferior, but we're white, we're the best, like we deserve to have their free labor, you know.
And check this out. It wasn't in the beginning, all white people weren't included, you know.
Right.
It was, they started bringing in the Irish, the Italians to kind of for election for voting purposes, census purposes, for whatever, to so everybody that like they say, when people say, well, blacks weren't the only ones enslaved, but no, when the Irish came over to America, or the Italians, they were indentured servants, but they weren't counted in the first census.
Right.
They weren't counted as white people in the first census of United States of America. They had white people. They had white people, free white people, women, free women, and you know, he had all these categories: indentured servants, and then black was the last. You know.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean that when you talk about, you know, how the category of white has expanded over time. I mean, of course, that applies to me being, you know, of a Jewish background, Jewish ethnicity. Like, of course, you know, Jews didn't used to be considered white, but you know, that and which just goes to show you it's a social construct, you know. And so like nowadays, like obviously anywhere I go, people see me, I'm white, I'm a white person. Like there are some Nazi assholes who don't want me to be seen as white, you know, because they don't like Jews, and they wish I were not seen as white, but oh well. I mean, yeah, of course I am. I'm white.
Oh well.
But I'm also otherized sometimes as a Jew, but yeah, like that. So this definition has expanded over time and changed. But regardless, I think that, you know, we can't pretend like Black people haven't had it the worst when it comes to the dehumanizing, like those racist tropes that have been, you know, created for the purpose of maintaining slavery, you know, so subjugating Black people like that. Like that was something else, by the way. You know, you asked me earlier about what led me to do that video, and I was talking about the different historical facts I was learning, and as one of the things I was reading about was just the history of the racist tropes from the slave days and on through Jim Crow and all of it. Oh, and that was something else too. I watched the movie 13th, you know, and that was really good, very eye-opening. But just when you just read just the racist tropes, you know, the savage and I mean, just all of them, these ideas of that, the ways that they would dehumanize Black people and try to justify why they were barbarians. Like we have to, you know, we're helping these people by making them, you know, our slaves basically. But you see, like, I don't know how anybody could deny that those racist tropes are the exact same racist tropes that are institutionalized today and used to justify.
Passed down for years, generations, decades, centuries. And
that's why the police kill so many Black people, is those exact same racist tropes, and incarcerate same racist tropes. And, you know, something else that I had been reading and learning more and more about that on this, you know, which kind of helped me to get to this place and why I made that video, is just studying about the inequity between racial groups when it comes to like the wealth gap, you know, between Black and white people. Well, yeah. And it just like the fact that there was nothing, the government never made it right. The government never changed anything in terms of like all the money that white people made off of slave labor.
We talked about this. They never made the proper amends.
in not in any way. That's why it's like the status quo is severe inequity between racial groups. And we've just been like, you know, continuing on with that same status quo, doing it over and over and over again, because we've never intentionally tried to change it. And because it takes taxpayer money to do it. And of course, these rich white people are like, nope, you can't take it from me. This is my money. I earned it, you know? And it's like, well, and they don't even want to talk about how that money, the multi-generational wealth and the multi-generational advantages that all these white people have had, you know, generation after generation. And whereas what Black people and their families and the ways that they've been screwed, you know, on an institutional level, generation after generation after generation.
Okay. Well, here you go, Sally. I'm a young white kid or white person. My family didn't benefit from this. My family never owned slaves. My family, you know, I never did anything. We're poor. Answer
Yeah.
those. What do you say to those questions or those statements?
Yeah, I mean, it's not about saying that, like whether you're poor as a white person or not is not the issue and doesn't really change anything, because it's like if you still have had an easier life because you're white. You still can go anywhere and you're still seen as a white person. You're not dehumanized, criminalized the same way, you know, viewed suspiciously based on your race. And you haven't had like where you're born, like even before you're born, like things that your family, the connections, the houses in your family, the you know, I mean, but just it's so much bigger than just any individual's circumstances.
Right.
And we don't even understand the ways in which our lives could have been so much harder if we white people, if we had been Black on top of, you know, if you're poor, well, if you had been Black and poor, like it would, you know, I mean, that's the thing is just like, I just don't have any patience anymore, because like if people are still saying that type of thing still now, then it's just like, okay, yeah, you don't want to understand it. Like you're choosing, like the people will try to use up your emotional labor. And this is what I understand now that I did not used to understand, is that they want you to try to educate them and like use up all your emotional labor and take all this time being like, let me explain what this means.
Yes. Yeah.
But they don't want to understand it, and they're just wasting your time and they're just trolling you. They don't give a shit. And so fuck them. You know, I mean, it's just like I no longer even care about trying to educate or explain any of this to people who still don't get it, because if they wanted to get it, Google's open 24/7.
Yeah.
They would be reading. There are
so
books.
much information out here. So much.
Right. There are research papers. Like there's so much. They would easily, I mean, there's tons of YouTube videos. There's a million things. They'd be listening to Black voices. They'd be reading How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. There are a gazillion ways that they can learn. So if they like, that's why I'm like, I am not your teacher. And
real quick, and we both don't know everything. We both don't know all, you know, what's going on. It's just two people having a conversation, two people from totally different backgrounds having a conversation, a constructive conversation about what's going on. I don't claim that I know anything. Do you? Do you know everything?
Everything? No.
Okay. No, I just wanted to kind of put that out there. We're not coming in as some experts. We're just two people having a, you know, that's bonded, but having a conversation about a topic that needs to be discussed. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not about being an expert. Like, yeah, I've never claimed to be one. Yeah, for sure. It's just about like, these are some basic facts, and it should not be controversial to want to dismantle white supremacy. Like, I don't even know, how is this controversial? It's just being a decent human. Like why would I want to be, the fact that I've had an easier life by being white, like that on its face maybe doesn't sound so bad to somebody, but it comes at the expense of your life, all these other Black people and brown people, other people of color. Like it comes at the expense of other people's lives. Other people suffer in order for me to have that white privilege. And so it's like, if somebody says, you know, oh, I don't, you know, my life's been hard, I'm white, so therefore there's no white privilege. The bottom line is that being white has only ever benefited you and me, us, everybody who is white. It has only ever made our lives easier, our whiteness. It has never been a factor that has, you know, made our lives harder. And then, you know, and when white people, this is something else they want to do. They want to talk about these anecdotes, like, oh, well, one time,
Look
you
at
know,
Oprah.
what?
Or just, I always get thrown. Look at Oprah. Look at Michael Jordan. Look
Oh,
at, you know.
yeah. Oh, that's a whole other. I wasn't even going to say that.
Oh,
I
you
know
weren't going. Okay, you know
no,
what I'm
I was
talking about. Okay.
I was talking about when white people tell me, oh, one time I got beat up because I went to, I was
Oh,
in an
trying
all
to
black
say, yeah.
neighborhood or an all black school, or
Oh, yeah.
this black person was mean to me and called me a cracker, or, you know, they did this or that to me because I'm white, you know, and like, and it's like that, they act like, that's like in this vacuum, as if it's not in the context of the entire society and world in which we live, which is, you know, it's rooted in white supremacy, and us being white, we are institutionally advantaged every single day in so many ways, systemically, institutionally, you know. And whereas a black person being black, like, obviously, like, you know, you're always at a disadvantage institutionally, and like that never changes. That these things are like the layers and layers of you know, ways that this impacts our lives. I mean, this is why I say it like this now, that white supremacy is the underlying structural foundation of our entire society. And that's just undeniable. And it was that way before we were born. Like, it's been like that forever, you know. And so you can't just deny it, and you can't try to make it about individuals. Like, it's not just about an individual's, you know, choices or an individual's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot bigger than that.
But what's keeping it going? Here's what's keeping us going: the individual's fear, and it's a lot of fear. Oh, I'm gonna give up. I've got, if I can't give up my white privilege, what's going to happen?
Right. Yeah.
Fear of, okay, what if all these people get in power? Are they going to do the same thing to us as we did to them?
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of things just keeping them holding on to that last, you know, ditch effort to hold on to this system, or not even get involved, or not even want to change it, because fear is driving that whole thing.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? Good. I mean, honestly, like, I am at the point where it's like white people need to get uncomfortable. White people have been far too comfortable. It's for far too long. Like, and, you know, and it's really this, white people need to understand, like, everything is for us. Like, it always has been, like, everything institutionally, everything, you know, government, power structures are all made for us, by us. And, like, you know, whereas, you know, black people and other people of color, like, you all feel uncomfortable all the damn time. Like, this shit is not made for you. Like, your discomfort has never fucking mattered to anyone in positions of power. Like, they're just like, oh, well, like, get the fuck over it. Like, you're uncomfortable that police are pulling you over and harassing you and arresting you, you know, and killing you possibly, you know, and like tough shit, you know. And it's about power. It's about, you know, power, and a power imbalance on an
Money.
institutional level. Yeah, I mean, all of it. And it's just, I think that more and more I just understand that all of this shit is a social construct. It's all socially constructed. Capitalism, you know, white supremacy, patriarchy, all of it. And therefore, like, we can always change it. We can always improve it. There's no reason why we couldn't. And there's no excuse not to make society more equitable, just, and, moral. I mean, this shit's immoral. And I mean, why should we just accept all of this unnecessary and preventable constant suffering, and just this cruelty? There's so much despair, and like, for what? It's all fake. Like, it's all socially constructed. So like, yeah, we got to demand to change it. We have to get closer to liberation, and there's no excuse not to.
All right. Okay, let's go with this. Racism, white supremacy. What's the difference? Or is there a difference?
They're the same. They're the same. Don't you think?
Well, then let me say this. At one time, it was all racist. All you heard was racist, racist, racist. But then when I started doing my research, that's when I stopped basically using racism, knowing where the racism is coming from is white supremacy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So a lot of time I'll put them together so that people understand it's racism / white supremacy. Like,
because some people are taking pride in being racist. Oh, yeah, But if you say white supremacy along with it, I think it gives more meat to it.
Well, and I think it's important to say it, to clarify, because that way people, like, when people want to say, oh, you're being racist against white people, it's like, that is not possible, because racism is white supremacy. And, or you could say like racism is rooted in, sometimes I'll say that racism is rooted in white supremacy and in anti-Blackness. And that is what racism is. And then, obviously racism is racism against other non-white races as well. But I always say, like, it's rooted in anti-Blackness, because, like, I think that the closer to Black you are, the more you are dehumanized, or the closer to
the more you dehumanize, right?
Yeah, the more you're perceived as closer, to Black, rather, but based on how you pass, or how you're perceived socially. I think, for sure.
Because they say it's like I play sports, play basketball, and it's like a game within a game. Because I went to predominantly white schools, and I have a lot of my friends are Caucasians. A lot of them. If you look at my timeline, look at my friend list, it's a lot. And the one thing that I notice is that amongst white people, they don't call each other white people. They call each other whatever they are, wherever region they came from, or whatever they are. Now, so with that being said, when they made up white people and included these group of people and white people, Black people, also other non-whites. We talk about Black people because it's been very hard, and a lot of people have had it hard, but it's been very, very hard on Black people, and it's still today very hard. And it's been very hard on other groups, and I never want to minimize it. That's why I prefer non-whites now. But once they made up white people, we became an enemy, a natural enemy, without people knowing that this is what it is. We've been pitted. We've been pitted against each other. What do you say about that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that that's really true. Actually, that's an interesting topic of conversation, because it's not something that I think about a lot, but I think that you're right. And actually what comes to mind when you say that, that different people of color have been pitted against each other, I think especially when it comes to immigrants, undocumented immigrants, especially, I know that especially on the right, that they want to use that to try to, as like a selling point to Black people, like, oh, well, it's these undocumented or the illegals, that are taking your jobs and this kind of thing. And so then I think there might be some of that going on. And definitely I think that there is a lot of racism amongst different people of color. And then, I've learned a lot about colorism, even within the Black community, being a problem, right? Is that what you're referring to, is like colorism?
Well, yeah. Well, but the natural, if you say yourself as a white person, then you put yourself separate from others, and that's your natural. How can you? Because like that's how the police see us. You know, every now you got Blue Lives Matter, so you got to have an enemy. Every person that makes himself a part of something, they have to have an enemy. And I think that, you know, and black people were the boogeyman. Black men were the boogeyman for hundreds of years. Recently, you know, with Donald Trump, the Mexicans have been singled out. But before that, Muslims and Arabs were the
Yeah.
boogeyman.
Yeah.
And so when you say us against, this
Yeah.
is the whole thing that. So I'm gonna call you white, you with us. So now we got an enemy. But okay, if we need you to fight for us, the whole country, then okay, we got to fight against the Muslims. You know, this is a game. It's a silly game. It's a
Oh
wicked
yeah.
game that they play.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's all bullshit. And for me, I think the only reason that we need to talk about, like, we need to point out to white people that they're white is because when I say I'm a white person, all it means is that I benefit from the existence of racism. You know, that's all it means. And this is why, like, all this bullshit with these racist people, these dumbass Nazis, when they say, like, I'm proud to, or no, not just that, but they say it's okay to be white. It's okay to be white. And they say, oh, and you should be proud to be white. And there's, you know, and why can't we have, you know, white pride and all of that shit?
Right.
And it's like, well, but whiteness is not, like how you and I already said, it's not anything biological. There is no race gene. Being white is not scientific, and neither is being black. Race, none of it. There's no race gene. And so literally all it means, being white, it just means that you benefit from the existence of racism, which is institutionalized and systemic. And so because of racism, because of white supremacy on this institutionalized level, we white people who are seen as white in society, we benefit, we are privileged by this existence every fucking day in so many ways. And even, like I said, before we were born, our parents were privileged, you know, and so, like, these conditions were set up even before we were born. And so, like, the ways in which we benefit, you know, because white supremacy exists for this purpose, to benefit white people, to make money, profits for white people, all of this. And so to say, like, you're proud to be white, like, to me, all you're saying, if you say that, is that I am proud that I benefit from racism at the expense of the lives of black and brown people, the people of color. Like,
Right.
it's like you're bragging about
That's
genocide.
that's what it's become in their mind. It's becoming it's becoming. I'm not you. You're lower than me. I'm white, and I don't know how many times I've heard white men ask me, "Oh, how come we don't have you got the BET, you got Black Entertainment Awards.
Right.
How come we don't have White Entertainment Awards?" And I tell them, there's no such thing as white. You know, if you were to go, if you were to go that route, you know, the Italians, the whatever, or people will have problems within that of distinguishing who they are.
Well,
and so how many? Yeah.
Right.
So
and it's like, and because white people took black people from Africa and kidnapped them in chains and took them to this country against their will, and, like, stole their entire culture from them. And, you know, I mean, like, so because of that, black people in this country don't even know, like, I mean, Africa's a big ass continent. It's not a country. Like, I feel like so many dumbass white people don't realize that Africa's not a country. And so, like, all these black people, they can't even trace which country, you know, their ancestors came from.
Yeah, I'm going to do an ancestry. I'm going to do ancestry.com within the next month.
Let me know how that goes.
Oh, I'll definitely. You'll be one of the first I'll let you know.
Yeah, that'll be cool. I should probably do that too. That'll be interesting. But yeah, I mean, just like we took, like, white people took away that entire history, the culture, And, you know, then you think about, I mean, down to Black people's last names. I mean, it's from their slave owners, you know? So like all of it, like the fact that I just think it's so fucked up, like the layers and layers of fucked up shit of that Black people had to go through in this country. So then for white people to be like, oh, well, why can't we have, you know, white entertainment? It's like everything is for us. Like we have fucking everything. It's like we can't just fucking understand. Like they have been, you know, that Black people have been intentionally, you know, left behind and kept out of all of these things.
Right.
And like finally are like little by little rising up and saying, you know, we deserve fucking something. And it's like when but it's just the fact that it doesn't make all these white people so fucking angry at the ways that we have destroyed Black people's lives for generation after generation after generation and took all of this from them. Like that's what I always think about this, is that Black people in the United States, like we talk about like Black culture. I mean, you can't separate it from racism, white supremacy. I mean, that's what's so sad, is that like racism, white supremacy created the conditions of that Black people have been forced to live in this country all of these years. And so like Black people have like the culture, the awesome things like the music and the all of the great things, the art, you know, all of it is like, despite, you know, all of this
tragedy, all this
horrific shit that we took all of this stuff away. Like we tried, you know, white people tried for you to have no joy, to have like just the shittiest lives, and like you are our property, like, you know, all of this, like you exist for us, you know.
Did a lot of damage, like, yes.
Yeah, psychologically, I mean, just the fact that we are still dealing with the ramifications, because we never fucking made it right. We never had justice. We never had equity. We never went in and said, let's fix this shit and let's educate kids in the schools with the details of all this fucked up shit. I mean, never. Like, it's just pathetic. The schools barely teach any of the facts of how horrible, you know, white people, white men, especially in this country, have been. But anyway, so that's why it's like, it's laughable, like the layers and layers of horrible fucked up shit that white people have done to Black people, and just stole their history from them, stole their culture from them, you know, abused them, raped them, killed them, genocide, slavery, like all of these things along the way that continue on to this day. Maybe just this system has evolved a little bit, so it looks a little bit different, but
it doesn't look as horrific as it was, but it's kind of behind. Now, what about this statement? If you claim to be a white person, you're racist.
Oh yeah, so that's like when people say like, oh, I'm colorblind, or I don't see color. So is that what you mean? Like,
well, okay, naturally, if you claim to be a white person, then and knowingly or unknowingly, you have signed up for white supremacy. Am I correct?
Yeah. Well, we all already did sign up for white supremacy, like the day we were born. I mean, it's all, you can't you can't avoid it. That's the thing. So to say you're white it's just like how I said before, saying that you're white has to do with how you are seen and perceived in our racist, white supremacist society. And it's an undeniable fact. So the fact that I am white, like and even sometimes a lot of people who are clearly like, they look white, clearly white passing, and like they'll make some racist statements. And like a lot of time I'll point out like that they're white, and they'll be like, oh, well, you know, well, I'm half, you know, half Native American, or I'm half, or a fourth this, or, you know, fourth Latina or whatever. And they'll sometimes, and like that may be true, but for the context of this conversation, like if they said something racist and I'm pointing out their privilege, like if you look white and you are white passing, for the purposes of this racist society, you are privileged. You have white privilege. You benefit from racism, from white supremacy, because every day you go out into this world and you are seen as a white person. You know what I'm saying? So like that's that's just the way it is. Like, that's not
It has,
bad,
but the
good,
effects,
it's
though,
just
the
bad.
psychological effects is telling you that if you're going to claim you're a white person, then you have to have an opposite, and that opposite is not you. It's not equal to you. It's not beneficial. It's not. It's not you. It's not better. It's less than you, and that's where it's just. I'm just seeing the terminology that's been passed down because we when we claim when you look like you claim you're white today, you're not claiming all the brutality and the stuff in the past. It's just this new stuff that's been forgotten about or watched or overlooked and not acknowledged or not even acknowledged anymore. So I think by not even just staying in this bubble in this country is going to continue on. It's never going to stop. I mean, titles are titles. You know, titles are a lot. Titles say about who and what you are. Now, I don't like to claim some of the. I don't like to be told that I'm black. You know, because it's a lot associated with that, good and bad. You know,
Yeah.
but you understand what I'm saying?
Well, here's how I think about that. I mean, for you as a black man and all the shit that you've always had to deal with in this racist society, it makes sense that like at some point you're like, okay, I got it. Like I'm black, like you live it every day. So I can only begin to imagine how like exhausting it all, like all this shit is, because you're fucking living it. You know what I mean? Like for me, that's part of my white privilege. Like I can talk about this and it's not firsthand. Like I don't go out into the world and fear cops murdering me. So
That's right. That's what I'm talking about. That natural enemy, that kind of mentality. You know, we're not looked at as humans anymore. We're looked at as skin colors. That's what I guess. That's what I'm saying. We're not
so here's
dehumanized. There you go.
So the problem with what you're saying though is like you're not saying it in a bad way, but I will say I hear a lot of like right-wing, right-leaning, centrist types of people who sometimes will be like, oh, you know, guys, let's stop talking about race. Can't we all just be people? Let's all just be human beings and stop, you know, like we don't have to always define each other by our race. Kind of, I know that you're not necessarily saying it like that, but I understand where you're coming from. They're bad talking in bad faith, though. You're not. That's the difference. So those types of people who are making bad faith arguments, the reason that they're saying that is because they don't want to fix anything. They don't want to change anything. They do not want us to keep talking about the problems going on with racism, with white supremacy, with racial oppression, with racial injustice, with all of this, with racist policies, with police racism, police violence, like all this shit. There are a lot of people who will use that line of, come on, guys, let's all just be people. Let's not be racist. Let's not talk about how like I'm white and how you're black. But because it's better for them to just ignore racism and move right along with this status quo. So that's what's dangerous about that. So I will say that I think the way we discuss this is important. The nuance matters, the details matter. So like what's the goal behind the conversation? Like what's the reason that we're talking about this? So like obviously don't just bring up somebody's race for no reason. Like, you know what I mean? Like just randomly like talking about like, oh, this person's black and that person's white and blah, blah, blah. Like in the supermarket or something, you know, like obviously, yeah, that's pretty fucked up. But like, I think that when we are discussing how our race, the race that we are perceived as, which is, that's literally all race is how we're perceived. How has that impacted our lives? How does it impact our lives every fucking day? How does it impact our society on institutional levels? How does it impact our policies? How does it impact our beliefs? You know what I mean? That stuff. And I just have to give another shout out to the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, because I think he does an outstanding job talking about this, like how the default is to be racist in this society. Like it's impossible.
That's okay. That's what I meant. That's what I meant with, like, if you're saying you're white, you're going to the default. That's what I kind of meant. Exactly.
Well, I don't know. So I guess I'm confused as to what you're saying there, because saying you're white
It's saying you're different, though. It's continuing to say that you're different, and the connotation.
So wait. You're talking about people who are like proud to be white?
No, it's just are just assimilated to that, and just separate themselves, not necessarily because those people, like you said, white power, we know those people are, but I'm just saying, like, a person who maybe don't have those views, don't have those strong opinions, when they associate themselves as white, they're joining a part of a group that's separate from the world, the separate from humanity, and then it keeps them separate from us in this country, and it keeps racism moving forward instead of.
Well, it depends. Associating yourself as white, if you mean that that's your identity, well, then like if you're doing it like, something like that, I'm white and that's awesome, and this is my identity, and I am proud to be white, and my white, culture, blah, 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 like that's Nazi shit. That's fucked up.
But do they use it for themselves? Do they use it? Because, like I said, when I was growing up around white people, they didn't call each other white. The only time they called each other white was against me, or against people of color. They didn't call each other white. They called each other Jewish. They called each other Italian. They called each other Polish. They called each other. Yes. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I think it is very, very important to point out to white people that they are white, because it pisses them off a lot of the time, because they want to. White people want to pretend as though they are just a default person, and like they're not any race, like as if they're just raceless, but like the only people who like have a race are people of color. And so they're like, well, because like obviously you are like reminded all the time in this racist society that you're a black man. Yeah, like
every day.
You can't avoid it. You can't just ignore it and move along, because you are marginalized in this, in this racist ass society. So whereas we white people can choose to just ignore race completely, ignore that it even is something that impacts people, ignore it altogether, and just be like, la-di-da, let's just live our lives. Like I'm just a person. That's why they say, like, I don't see color, right? Like I can just ignore, let's all just be people, blah, 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 and it's totally, they don't even want to understand how harmful that is, because they don't want to acknowledge the social construct that exists of race, the existence of racism in our society. Because if they don't see people's race, including their own, then they don't have to ever see racism. And so they can just pretend it doesn't exist. And then they maintain this status quo of racism. And so that's the thing, is white people don't usually go around talking about how they're white unless they are like hardcore Nazi, like white identitarian types, like on the extreme right. But most white people just want to ignore that they have any sort of race at all. But then that's why I love to remind them that they're white, because it impacts them in their lives, and it always has, just as you being black has always impacted you in your life. And that's why, like, I made that video, because I can't pretend as though, I haven't had a more privileged experience in life and a much easier life based on my whiteness. I mean, because that would be a complete lie. And so, of course, it impacts my thinking in all these different ways. And I've been socialized into this shit, into racism. And I have to always be like learning more about these fucked up bullshit beliefs that I was socialized into throughout my life, and that I'm still being taught. And you're like, all of us are like, it's, these messages are from all around us everywhere. And they are the underlying structural foundation of our society, like from neighborhoods people live in, schools people go to I mean, fucking everything. It's, you can't deny it. So when white people want to pretend like they're not white, like, fuck no, they're white. And it impacts their thinking. It impacts their experiences. Like, a lot of white people think that their ideology, their outlook, their worldview is like the worldview, the outlet, right? They're like, this is the default outlook, especially like the American, the Western worldview, but specifically the white Western male worldview. It's like, that is like default, but they don't understand that that's their bias. Like, they think like, if you talk about your outlook, they'll be like, well, that's just because you're biased as a black man. Like, why does everything have to be about race? You see things this way just because you're black.
Right.
But it's like, yeah, motherfucker, but you see things your way because you're fucking white and you're a white man, and you've always, everything is like catering to your ass. Everything is like centered around you. Like, the government centers white men, especially. I mean, all white people, but especially white cis hetero men, you know, and Christian men, especially. Like, so who are we centering? Whose voices are we centering? Whose feelings, whose opinions? And so that's why, like, now I'm straight up, I'm just like, white feelings don't fucking matter. White feelings don't matter, because we always have centered white feelings. And like, when I saw that video of that cop, that woman crying about the Egg McMuffin, you know, you saw that video, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw it on your timeline. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's like such a mess. But my takeaway from that, not only do white feelings not matter, because we have centered white feelings forever, and we've been like, we need to stop fucking doing that. But not only that, cop feelings don't matter, you know? And so like, I saw that woman like, oh my God, why can't you all just say thank you to us cops? And I was like, no, you know what we need to say more of? Fuck you to cops. Like, this is the thing, is like, cop feelings have been centered by our government, by our policymakers. They're like, oh no, cops.
They see me as the enemy. They see us as the enemy.
Right. And they're like, you need to worship us. You need to kiss my ass. You need to get,
Do what
get
you
down
told.
on your knees. Right. And it's like, no, it's like, we need to be way meaner. They absolutely need to shut the fuck up and go fuck themselves. And like, we need to center like black lives, black people's lives, you know, and Latino lives, and
Native
indigenous
lives.
Yeah, exactly. Like, all people of color lives, but especially centering, you know, the most oppressed, the most subjugated, most disenfranchised. Like, because if we center those people that are the most vulnerable, you know, their needs, their lives, then everyone else will benefit as well. And everyone else will, like, we can't have liberation until we have liberation for the absolute most exploited, oppressed people. And then we're all able, you know, to get it from that. Like, it will liberate us all. I mean, if cops can fucking not kill black people, like, whenever they're like, when people are like, oh, well, cops kill white people too. It's like, but if cops are able to actually not kill black people, then we know they'll be able to stop killing white people, because like, they're quicker to kill a black person, because they are more scared of black people, of course. But anyway, so that's why I say that a lot now. I get it now more than ever before. It's just like, we need to stop centering white feelings. We need to center, you know, black lives. It's about people's actual needs, their survival needs for their life, about their quality of life, not about anybody's feelings.
Okay, so with that, let's we're going to come back. What do you say? You want to say 2 weeks from now, or? What do you think?
It's up to you. It's up to you.
Yeah, no. Let's do it bi-weekly. Get
Okay.
some, and we want to be solution oriented too, right? We want to
Yeah.
talk about solution. That's my biggest thing. I don't want to sit up here and just say blame this, or be a victim or anything like that. You know, I want to be, I want to be pro. I want to be proactive. I want to be a part of the change, part of a new culture.
And can I say something real quick about that?
No,
like just when you mentioned victim, because a lot of time, you know how a lot of people want to be like, oh, don't have a victim mentality kind of thing. And it's like, you can't, we have a survivor mentality. You can't have a survivor mentality and be empowered to be liberated, to fight for your liberation, you know, which is like, that's empowering. Like, fuck yeah, you know, like fighting for your liberation, feeling empowered to fight and to not let people keep hurting you, keep abusing you, keep oppressing you. So, but it's like, first you have to acknowledge how you have been victimized. You have to acknowledge the ways in which you have been a victim, before you can be a survivor and live and have a survivor's mentality and live. And so it's like both at the same time. I just wanted to say that because I know a lot of people, they're like, oh, you know,
you hear it a lot. You hear it a lot. Yeah. You hear it a lot.
It's a
that's an easy way to dismiss. Yeah, that's the best way to dismiss somebody.
I mean, being a victim is not anybody's fault. Like, that's the whole point, is like feeling no shame. Like, being a victim of oppression, of, you know, whatever system of oppression we're talking about. I mean, we're all fucking victims of capitalism, you know, and victims of white supremacy, victims of patriarchy, you know, Christian supremacy. Like, there's all these systems of oppression. But it's like acknowledging the fact that you are victimized by this system of oppression is necessary so that you can fight to dismantle it and not allow people to keep hurting you. So, it's empowering.
So we got some topics for our next program. Sally, I like I said, I've been wanting to do this, and you know how long I've been talking about doing this, and you see how it's come to fruition. And
I'm really glad. I'm glad that we did.
This was definitely some organic, not something scripted. We're not doing anything behind the scenes. This is just basically how our phone conversations go. So I'm glad to do it on this level. I think we can, you know, make a difference, and that's what this year has taught me. You know, I just turned 50 this year, so I want to be a part of the solution, not the problem, and make a difference. And you know, I found a way to do it, and I found a person to do it with. So in this area, so and you know, we still got our democratic socialist thing going. So
yeah, oh yeah.
All right, so we're gonna.
I didn't know you were 50. I mean, they always say black don't crack, but it's like, I really think it might be true.
Well, I'll take that. Take it. I feel good. Just a number.
Good.
All right. Until next time, you know, I'll talk to you before that, but until next time, thanks for everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it. This is our first one of many. And we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, Dre. Thanks, everybody.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Later. Bye.